Welcome to Not Your Ordinary Parts, a podcast where we talk about hard things associated with the human experience with the goal of increasing awareness, growth, and healing. You may hear information from professionally licensed therapists, life coaches, healers, doctors, etc. This information is not medical advice or therapy and is not meant to replace actual therapy or instructions given to you by a doctor or personal therapist. I'm your host, Jalon Johnson. My guest today is Cindy Chia.
Hi,
Cindy
Dylan.
is a psychotherapist. Hi, Cindy. Cindy is a psychotherapist and a founder of Aspire Psychology. Cindy works closely with her clients and takes an interest in helping them achieve their version of their life goals. Some of her specialties include treating patients with depression, anxiety, trauma, stress, marital and relational problems, LGBTQ concerns, and others. Cindy knows and understands that at times we hurt so much and for so long that we forget what true happiness feels like, and this is where she can help. So, Cindy, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk more about mental health, Asian culture, or other cultures in trauma.
Cool beans. Well, I gave just a bit of an introduction, but so the audience can get to know you better, can you give us a little bit
Yeah,
of background about yourself and who you are and what you do?
yeah. So my name is Cindy. I was born and raised in Malaysia, and I left home at about 17 to pursue my bachelor's in Australia, University of South Australia. Um, I wanted to say a lot of my trauma stemmed from childhood, my parents, my dad especially. And then, it continued into adulthood to where cycle just repeats itself, right? And when I moved to Australia for my undergraduate degree in psychology, I also experienced a lot of trauma there, mainly from racism. For some reason, a lot of Australians don't like Asians. We are perceived as people who steal their jobs, who use their resources, who are just too many of us, and who don't speak good English. So I think a lot of that, you see that a lot here too, right, with other race. But in Australia, that was pretty predominant. Um, so there's that. That's my story. And then I got tired of it eventually. So I started looking at options for my continuing education. And I found that, from media and books, it sounds like America is very way lightning years ahead and more progressive. So I thought the racism will not be as rampant here. So I applied for a study abroad program, to Oklahoma State University, and I had the best time of my life. What's sad though, yeah, racism is not too rampant towards the Asian culture, but what I saw was it's rampant towards other cultures, which is not good too, right? Like I'm not a victim of it anymore, but also, in that other way, but the other cultures are, which is not good also. So that's what interests me with my work is, trying to manage this better, but also trying to cope and teach other people how to cope with all of these cycles and also how to break these cycles from the family, childhood, or whatever, adulthood even. Um, and yeah, most of my work focuses on trauma. Apart from that, my family, I've been my own, if you check out my Instagram, I post about my own healing journey with my parents as well, which has been really powerful for myself, for my parents, and also for audiences too. What really surprised me though is that my parents actually finally acknowledged, their part of the trauma when I started doing my own healing journey as well. So that has been very enlightening in a lot of ways. So I've been sharing all of that on my page as well. So if you want to check that out to see if that's relatable to you or whoever that you may come with. So that's kind of where I came from. Just from a small town in Malaysia.
Thank you for that. I do follow your page, and I think that your journey and the way that you express yourself is so good and very relatable. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, and thank you for agreeing to do this with me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I mean, being real, you know that, Jalon, right? Like being real is so important. I feel like social media is just filled with a lot of filtered stuff now. So I think being real is very enlightening. So I appreciate you being that as well on social media and for yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I think mental health is such a big topic nowadays. And I think with just the stresses that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis now, the new normal after the pandemic, I think a lot of us really were thrown into the fire, so to speak, as far as mental health. And one of the things that I think the pandemic did was it shed a lot of light on mental health, because a lot of us were pushed to a point to where we couldn't cope, or we were pushed past our limit, and we had to take a second and stop and say, hey, maybe I'm not okay. Maybe I need to talk to somebody. Maybe I need to, take a step back and really assess my mental health. So because of that, I think a lot of us are now monitoring our mental health. So the first question I wanted to ask you was, how can someone do a mental health check-in?
Yeah. I think it goes both ways. So if you want to do that check-in for yourself, I think it's important to have that reality check too. What are my blockings, right? Like what am I avoiding? What are some of the things that I'm putting off right now that I'm not wanting to address? And then go from there, right? I think it's easier to say, oh, I'm good. How are you? I'm good. I'm good. It's fine. I'll be fine. I think that's an easy way out. But if you want to go a little bit deeper, ask yourself those questions. Be true to yourself. The reason why also, it is very uncomfortable. Truth is very uncomfortable, but it's enabling you to move forward also in life, and to move past your own trauma, to move past your own biases. So sometimes it's good to do that. Just asking yourself that question. Journaling is a good place to start too with the mental health check-in. I like to have this. I have this journal. It's called Stoic. I don't remember the full name, but it's Stoic Journal. So what it does is it asks you powerful questions. It have you like read a chapter or something, and then it asks you questions. I love that because sometimes I'm just at loss of questions to ask myself, or like good questions to ask myself. Because a lot of the time I'll just ask, okay, how am I feeling right now? Yeah, I can say like I'm feeling sad or angry or whatever, but it doesn't go deeper than that. And sometimes I'm just stuck with, those questions, right? So, journaling, I feel, is very important. Another part is having accountability and accountable partner, right? I have my partner right now. He does a lot of mental health checking with me too. When he notices something, or when he notices that I'm off a little bit than my usual, he will kind of check in for myself and for him. So he will even ask, like, how are you feeling and things like that? What can I do to help you? What can I do to make you feel better today? So it's a lot of accountability practice as well.
Right. I think something that you mentioned is, like someone will ask us, how are you? And we'll say,
Yeah.
oh, I'm okay. Right.
Yeah.
But that's not really how we are. That's just what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing you mentioned is, if you feel like you're sad or you're angry, you feel those things, but are you really getting curious with the feelings and why you're feeling them? That is, I feel, some good ways to really check in on the status of your mental health. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So the discussion of mental health, I think a lot of us growing up, it just wasn't present. It wasn't a thing that we talked about, or no one really knew what mental health was. So I have a two-part question now. And the first one is, was the conversation about mental health often replaced growing up with toughen up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that you asked that because it is 100% true for me and my family, and I would say in most people from my culture too, which is Asian, right? Um, at the beginning of my healing journey, I'm that expressive one, I'm that sensitive one. So I always have a lot to say about mental health and trauma. And it's always met with, get over it. It happened so long ago. Why can't you just forgive and forget? Oh, I love that word. Forgive and forget. And why can't you just, just get over it so you can move on with your life? Your dad's not that kind of a person anymore. Why can't you just do that? Yeah, a lot of conversation about toughen up. Is it toughen up or dismissive, right? It's like, I can't even feel anything without, my mom or my parents or my family asking me to shut me down. They literally just shut me down because it's uncomfortable for them. So yes, a lot of conversation about mental health is about being shut down. And I say it still is happening in a lot of capacities. But I do
For
have better
sure.
boundary now of honoring myself than to be shut down like that again. But I do get caught with that sometimes too.
I think a lot of us had to deal with, tough love because it was uncomfortable to be the sensitive one. And it was also uncomfortable to have to hear the things that the sensitive one was saying, and if you weren't in a position to where you could comfortably or easily deal with your emotions or feeling discomfort,
Right.
you would get shut down.
Yeah.
So I agree with what you said, and I emphatically understand it.
Yeah.
So what did the struggle of not being able to talk about mental health force some to do?
Yeah. I mean, so much. What I'm seeing with my own patients, though, is escape, right? Escaping the reality. So when your mental health is not addressed or acknowledged properly in life or on this earth, your mind will wander. Your mind will find a reality that is comfortable for you. So what is comfortable when you're, when you're being shut down all the time regarding your mental health? Substance, um, cycles, going through the same cycles because you don't talk about it. So therefore you have not much of an awareness of inside of it. So you repeat cycles from what you didn't like to what you like, what you didn't like before, and that transferred to your life right now. And you're doing that to other people also. So that's a revolving cycles, right? What else? Some people, it drives them to suicide, which is really sad because they feel like they're not heard and seen and they're not able to talk about their mental health. So what else is there to do but take your own life? Um, yeah, and a lot of that, I think a lot of just rejection that brings people to just shut down and escape as much as they can. So you're seeing, I mean, we're seeing a lot of that now, even from the pandemic. The residual effect of the pandemic is loss of jobs, right? Loss of loved ones and loss of, or even, what is it called? They call it the long haul COVID now, where you feel the effects for a long time, right? Even after you're tested negative. So we're seeing a lot of that now, a lot of sense of helplessness and hopelessness. And we don't want to get there because if you keep not wanting to talk about it, keep not wanting to acknowledge it, you will break down. You will break down. So we don't want to get
Hmm. So to kind of build off of that, would it be difficult later in life to understand your emotions if you didn't grow up in a setting where mental health was discussed?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you don't know what you don't know until you know, and then you
Mm.
don't know what to do with it. So it's a lot of catch-22. It's like, oh, for example, right? If you don't really talk about your mental health or your mental health struggles, you grow up to think like maybe you're not deserving of people listening to you, even, not being acknowledged or not being valued, and not being valued to have a voice even. What else? Yeah, you grow up to not being able to identify your feelings, or the things that you enjoy. So in my work, we do a lot of homework stuff. Always, I want to say, if I'm not confident 100%, 99% of my patient load will say, I don't know. I know my feelings are sad, mad, and happy. I don't know what else. So I always have like a feelings chart that I will put up on my office wall and be like, okay, point to me what you're feeling right now. Because a lot of the time we don't explore our true feelings. We just don't. I think the generic answers are always mad, sad, angry, happy, and all of that. So the chart is very important usually. And another thing that I always saw with my patients also is that a lot of them do not know what self-care is. So many people are overextended. They know how to overextend to their parents, to their friends, to their family, but they don't overextend to themselves. And it's always like, well, I will always suggest like, okay, maybe you can do some self-care activities. It's always met with like, what? You know, what am I going to do? And then I'll have to give some ideas and stuff like that too. So that is a red flag, right? For an adult to not know what self-care activities are, that means that a lot of your needs are not being met growing up. So that's kind of like my own discovery and see how that has affected adults from their childhood trauma or trauma that I have experienced.
I think one of the words that you mentioned was generic. I think that a lot of people who don't explore their feelings or who have never been comfortable feeling their feelings, they get used to just generic answers like you mentioned, right? So let's say one of your clients has been working with you for a while now and they're starting to see dysfunction and toxicity and they're on their healing journey. And as they start to heal, they start to break away from some of the patterns and cycles within the family system or relationships. How hard is it for someone who initiates change when it comes to mental health awareness?
So hard. I mean, I probably have an inkling that you know what that feels like, right? Like it's changing culture. It's changing. I mean, just think about the president of the United States. How hard is it to change something or change a system, change a law, right? It's so hard because you need a lot of approvals and you have a lot of like biases and you have a lot of learned habits. So in short, it's very hard because you will get a lot of pushbacks from people who have been used to the old you. So for example, if the old you were very compliant, very submissive, very, people pleasing, they're so used to that. They're so used to taking that from you, right? And then suddenly you have boundaries, like that blows them off their seat. Like, what? Now I don't really like you because now you have your own dignity and you have your own value that I don't really like you now. So expect that. I always tell my patients to expect losing people along the way during your healing journey because you will lose people. People are not used to assertiveness or healthy patterns. People are very used to taking advantage of people or toxic cycles and all of that. So you will lose a lot of people. People would start to misunderstand you probably too. And and you get a lot of pushbacks with your own healing as well, because suddenly now you value yourself enough, you respect yourself enough to have boundaries in place. People don't like it in general.
Yeah, I know it's hard. I see it as you're reintroducing yourself as a new person to the people that have known the old you. So they're not going to be comfortable. Who's this new person?
Right.
What happened to the Jalan or the Cindy that I knew?
Right. Right. And why did you change? Why are you more sensitive now? Right. Why do you want to keep us away now? So it's so many layers to how difficult this is. But I mean, the light at the end of the tunnel is you're doing this for yourself. You're not doing this for your parents. You're not doing this for your kids. You're not doing that. Well, maybe kids. I'll touch on that later, right? But you're not doing this for anyone else but yourself. And when that is taken care of, you will see how light you feel too, and how free you can be when you are no longer tied down by people or people's opinion or culture or toxic traditions. You will feel the difference. So not all is lost, it's hard, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
I like that. Okay, so the desire to feel healthy can feel like a personal attack on the dysfunction in family systems. what are some things that can be seen as the unhealthy family dynamic? Um, wait a minute. What are some things that can be seen as the unhealthy family dynamic that are being exposed as we start to separate ourselves?
Yeah, yeah. So you're asking if so the desire to be healthy can be seen as a personal attack by family, right? Is
Right.
what you're saying.
Right.
Um,
Like we mentioned, the people who have known the old version of you. So as you start to get healthy, this new person can feel like an attack to them because they're used to the older version of you.
right.
So what I'm trying to say is, what are some things that can be seen by the unhealthy family dynamic and exposed as we start to separate ourselves from it?
Yeah. I think a lot. So I got it's funny you asked that question because I got a lot of questions also as I was posting my own healing journey that how dare you expose your family around you, you know, and that is a intentional expose, right? But I've never been toxic about it. It's always very real, very, very authentic, and it comes from a good place. And I always, do like a damage control kind of a thing. And not so much of a damage control, but I just want to be real. Like, okay, so say, yeah, my dad was abusive, but he has grown so much, as a person. So I always put those two together, to paint a real picture, an authentic picture. So the dynamics, that are being exposed, as we separate ourselves can be like family, I don't know, feeling rejected, I think, by family members. And also disowning. I've heard of a lot of disowning as well as you are growing healthier, your family are not comfortable with that, and therefore they want, they'd rather disown you than accept your authentic self. Is that what you're asking?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Um, and also, they will probably be uncomfortable with the boundaries, like I said, also, that you set, because suddenly they have a limitation to how they treat you or how much they can access you. So they probably are going to be pretty unhappy about that too.
Why is it that you think, and you touched on this a little bit, but why is it that you think the cycle breaker is given such a hard time and labeled as the outcast or the black sheep?
Because I think the toxicity serves some people well. So people are gaining some positive outcome from the toxic cycle. So when you break that toxic cycle, that is an inconvenience for them. That makes it where they have to take some responsibility or accountability for something, right? So when you break that cycle where they're so comfortable with their own toxicity and unhealthy patterns, of course they're going to be pissed. Yeah, of course they're going to be pissed because you're breaking the cycle that they have benefited for years. So yeah, they're going to be pissed at you.
Wow. I mean, when you think about the fact that, like you said, when you post that your father was abusive, right?
Right.
Um, it's true, but also it makes the family or him look bad. But it doesn't detract from the fact that he was abusive to you,
Right.
right? So you can tell the truth about your story, and the fact that it makes someone else looks bad or look bad, I don't think that should be your responsibility if you're telling your truth.
Exactly. That shouldn't deter me from telling my truth, right? What I see this so interesting though, and I'm so passionate about this because, okay, I get a question of how dare you expose your dad like this? Well, how dare he abuse me like that for so many years? If you didn't abuse, you don't have to go through this. Chicken or
Right,
the egg.
right.
So it's like, take some responsibility and stop protecting abusers. Stop giving excuses. Even my mom, for the longest time, and she still is, try to protect my dad's image. Why? You're being abused too, or you were. That you're still, repeating that cycle, and that pisses me off. So yes, you did something. You make the bed, and you have to lay on the bed too. You just have to. If you didn't abuse, then we won't have to talk about it. But now we have to talk about it because the fact of the matter is that happened. So here we are. But yes, that deters a lot of people from talking. I mean, that deterred me for a long time from talking because of fear, right? Until I moved away, until I'm like 30 years old. And I'm like, I don't, they don't pay my bills anymore. And I don't have to rely on them for anything anymore. So if I'm burning this bridge to have a healthier life, I'm willing to do that. I'm glad I didn't have to do that because I really love my parents. They're awesome people now, and they've grown so much from them and if anything, my own exposing my healing journey has actually strengthened my relationship with them. So that's a beautiful part of that a lot of people maybe are not able to see, is that it has a potential in strengthened relationship too, instead of just being shut down or being disowned. They are some positive aspects to that too.
I'm glad you said that. That's great. And the fact that it was able to help strengthen your relationship, I think, because you were brave enough to take that step to tell your story, things got better for everybody.
Right. Yes. And I think that is step one. Communicating your truth was step one. Yes, it can go both ways, but luckily for me, it went the positive way, which is good. With a lot of pushbacks, of course.
I'm sure that's to be expected.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there were times when my dad didn't want to talk to me. Of course, I expected that, right? But we came out stronger from that.
That's good. What are some ways to support cycle breakers as they start their healing journey and as they make the decision like you that they're ready to speak their truth?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just be there and try not to justify anything. So as a friend or as a support system to a cycle breaker, you're not the judge. Who cares who's wrong or who's what and who did what? As long as if the cycle breaker tells you that they're hurt or they're traumatized or they're going through some kind of a depression or anxiety and things like that, listen to them. Be there for them. You don't need to play Judge Judy or whatever. You don't need to know who did what or who was wrong or who made the mistake. As long as you acknowledge, be present, and validate the cycle breaker's present feelings, I think that is enough for a lot of cycle breakers. A lot of the time, being a cycle breaker is a lonely place. You feel alone. I mean, you already get rejected by the people that you're trying to repay from. We don't need other people to judge us as well, or we don't need other people's opinions of us or our journey. So the least that we can do as a support system to a cycle breaker is to just be present.
And I know that healing is a big part of breaking away from dysfunction, and cycle breaking in general. What are some ways that we heal from a difficult childhood as we start this process of getting healthy and breaking away from dysfunction?
Yeah, good question. Like I mentioned on the previous one, right? Having a healthy support system, and don't be scared of weeding those people out. So maybe they were a good support system before on another, situation. Maybe it doesn't transfer. Maybe on this one they have biases, right? Or it cannot be as supportive as they would like to, or you would like them to. So I would say definitely pick and choose your closest friend, pick and choose your support system. That is so important because now is the most vulnerable time where you will feel lonely a lot and you will feel hurt a lot. You don't need negative people in your life or more negative people in your life to tell you what to do or tell you how to feel as a support system. So step one is that. Secondly, I always encourage people to see therapists, right? Just see somebody and talk about it. yes, you may think like, oh, you're just paying a friend to talk to you or to listen to you. It's not. A good therapist can break down so much for you. And most importantly, a good therapist can bring you a whole different perspective to where you can hopefully manage or cope with your struggles a little bit better than what you have known. Because a lot of the time, truth be told, we were not told how to regulate our emotions. We were not taught how to manage our depression. Nobody taught us that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to talk about everybody, but I wasn't taught that. And with that, how do you solve your own problems when you're not taught them, right? So a professional has gone through extensive training and school to be able to help us do that. So I see that as an investment. You don't have to go for a long time. You go to a place where you feel like you're good and just do maintenance from there. So therapist is important. I see my own therapist too. I think therapists should see therapists too, and most of us do, which is great. Let's see, what are some other ways to heal? Being authentic, I think is important too. Being real. Know that you don't have to protect anyone anymore, or babysit anyone's emotions anymore can be very helpful too. Once you have that in your head, you know that you are allowed, you have the permission to feel whatever you feel. That's the hardest part, I think, is that people feel bad for feeling something. For example, for the longest time, I felt bad for being resentful of my dad because he worked so hard for us. He worked like, I don't know, 3 to 4 jobs every day to make ends meet because he came from nothing, and when we needed something, he gave it to us. So there were so many good parts of him too, on top of the abuse. So then I feel bad, like, well, he did the best he could, or like his dad was abusive too, or like all of these excuses. So we need to give ourselves this permission to feel. And once you have that, I think it can be so empowering for your healing journey because now you can own it, you can acknowledge and own it and make it your own and try to move past that. Because if you're not identifying what feelings that you have, right, you don't know what to move past from, or you have no reason to move past from that. So I think identifying that can be very, very important in the healing journey.
I think a lot of us that may be able to relate to some of the things that you spoke about can agree that we may have had a difficult childhood. But also, if we had parents that were doing their best or that were working super hard, it's difficult to look at the fact that they did so much for us, but also there may have been a component where we didn't get our needs met there.
Right.
So you touched on that a bit. What are some other truths that we can embrace while we're on our healing journey?
Yeah. I think the biggest truth that we should embrace is our own truth. And it's difficult to identify that because people will gaslight you all the time. So, for example, in my own healing journey, I was gaslighted a lot by my parents. It wasn't that bad, is the big one. Your childhood wasn't that bad. Mine was worse, because they had to deal with their own stuff too, I'm sure. So a lot of the gaslighting and dismissing really, really made me feel bad or guilty even of my own healing process. So then I would stop that or like not willing to go more into my own journey because I feel bad. I feel guilty. So embracing your own truth is so important in the healing process because if you don't have your own truth, what other truths do you have? You're not going to get truths from the abuser because their point of view was probably justified, right? Like you deserve to be hit because you didn't listen. That will probably be their truth. But your truth is probably I did the best that I could. I just could not do X, Y, and Z that they asked me to do. So that is our truth. So embracing your own truth is very important in the healing process because if it's not for that, what else can we hold on to?
I love that. And I think that one of the big things of healing is also realizing that two things can coexist at one time, right? You could have been in a situation where you had a roof over your head, you had food, you had clothes on your back, shoes on your feet, but also you could have had some things that damaged you, or you couldn't, not just having some things that damage you, but not having some things could have also damaged you.
Right.
So I think owning your truth and being authentic to your story is very important. So I appreciate you bringing that out.
Thank
Okay, so you are a huge advocate for mental health in the Asian community.
you.
And I saw one of your posts that I loved. It said, in many Asian cultures, there is a tendency to remain silent about personal struggles, mental health, and family conflicts, which can continue the cycle of trauma. So I wanted to ask you if you could talk about that just a little bit and kind of what that looks like.
Yeah. We remain silent because we want to save face. Are you familiar with the term save face in the
Hmm.
culture? Yeah. Just to kind of recap, right? Like saving face means that a little bit like the keeping up with Joneses too. More like you want to be seen as perfect. You want to be seen as, good. Don't have mental health issues. You want to be seen at a certain light that you're not willing to talk about your own struggles. Yes, so that's huge in your culture. So so it can continue the cycle of trauma. Why? Because when we don't acknowledge our own trauma, we are probably not aware of what our cycles are. For example, my own cycle is, so my dad was a very impatient person, as a parent. I see that in myself too with my own parenting. And I hate that because I don't want to be my dad. Like that's the person that I'm trying to get over from. I don't want to be like him. And I don't want my daughter to go through what I went through too. So that was the cycle, that I was very impatient and a little bit OCD with cleanliness and things like that. So all of that quirks came from my dad. But once I acknowledge it, right? Once I had that sense of awareness of like, oh my gosh, I'm repeating that same cycle that I went through. I don't want to do that anymore. So now I need someone to keep me accountable. Again, going back to the accountable partner. So my partner is my accountability partner. So he will step in and be like, hey, maybe take a breather. I will step in for now and take a minute. So that's good. Being able to share that with him and to have him also keep me accountable and to keep myself accountable of my own, with my own sense of awareness is so important in stopping the cycle. Because if not, my daughter will probably end up like me, need to spend money to go to therapy, which is well worth it. But if we can save that money, we would. you know. But yes, so I think it's very crucial to talk about it to break that cycle, because if not, there's no awareness, there's no acknowledgement, and it's all just shut down in yourself, and your resentment somehow will manifest into your behavior, and your behavior will probably repeat the cycle too. So it all goes hand in hand.
I got you. I think a lot of the things that you spoke about are seen in a lot of cultures, but because you're an advocate for your culture, I wanted to give you this moment to have an opportunity to talk about that. And also, I have a friend who's Asian. We're very, very close. And I know for him, mental health wasn't something that was spoke about on a regular basis growing up. So I told him I was interviewing you, and I asked him if there was anything that he would want to ask you, or if he had any thoughts or feelings that he would want to express. And he did. So I wanted to kind of get your input or your feedback on it. And he said, um, when I was growing up, a lot of Asian families are trying to keep up with the Joneses. And it's not a good look when it's a bad or not a normal thing. We were never told to ask for help when it came to mental health issues. We were just told to pray and hope that it would get better. Everything was kept within the family, otherwise it would look bad. If you weren't a straight A student in honors or a computer engineer, etc., you were looked at as a failure.
Yes, 100% agree. It's so sad that a lot of our value comes from achievement, in the Asian culture and maybe other cultures too, but especially in the Asian culture, a lot of our value is placed on achievement. I think you touched on that. Like, if you're not X, Y, and Z, you're a failure. Because a lot of your value tied out to that. And it's sad. It's so sad. So I talked to a couple of my Asian peers too, and we talk about how like our parents just never really value our opinions, because a lot of what the traditional saying is that I have eaten more rice than you. So what made you smarter than I am? So it's kind of like your quote where like I'm superior of you and you should listen to me. So so we grew up with that, and then things change when we grow up to be an adult. It goes either way. So either they will start to respect your opinion now, or they will continue to dismiss you. And sadly, the pattern that we're seeing, and obviously this is not, research based, it's just based on what we've seen so far, is kids or adults now that are more successful in their career, are more valued by our country. And it's sad, because why does it have to be that way? Why does our value have to tie into our achievement instead of just who we are? So that's kind of what I notice as well. And from your friends' feedback, it sounds like you also probably felt that.
Wow. And like I said, because you're an advocate for your culture, I wanted you to have this opportunity. But like so many things that you're saying sound so familiar to my culture. So I think that these things may be being seen across the board. I mean, they may be a little stronger or what have you here and there in this culture or that culture, but I think that a lot of the dysfunction and the value systems are just based on things that are just worthless.
Right. Exactly. Worthless. You're right.
So worthless.
You're right on the nail there. It's worthless. Like, who cares how much money you make?
Right.
Who cares? I guess some people care. So then they will value you more. So it's sad, and I hope that our generation will break that cycle a little bit. And I'm seeing that now. So, which is good.
I'm glad. So I wanted to ask you another question, and this one is a little bit more personal, and may require a little bit of vulnerability. But I wanted to ask you, what has been your experience as an Asian female therapist, and do you think that you've had to work harder to get where you are because of being Asian or your background?
Yeah. I have two answers for this because it's very interesting from my own experience. So in school, when I was in college, I felt like a second class citizen a perfect example is I was in this research class. I love research class. Numbers just, I just love the technique and the technicality of people. So I was pretty good at it, I would say. I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm an expert, but I was very good at it. So I was in a group with, two other males, and then there's me. When we were doing the project together, I pointed out, I was like, hey, I think the research method that you're using is not the most accurate for this research. So can we explore another kind of research method? Because I kind of know, like different kinds of method matches, gives you different kind of problem solving things. And one of them said, and he was the top of the class. He's like the golden child, like top of the class, like very smart person also. He said no, because my method was right. And then so I was like, okay, fine, don't value my opinion, whatever. We turned it in and it was wrong. And it was exactly what I said it was. And obviously he didn't apologize. He didn't say anything. He didn't even acknowledge anything. So from then onwards, I did feel like I always have to prove myself that I know things. I think it's two parts though. One is being an immigrant. At that time, my English wasn't really Americanized or American sounding yet. So there's that language part where I feel like people value people who can speak better English, I think, in an English speaking country. And also being a female in a statistic class. I mean, female in math, it's already a stereotype that females are not very good in science and math skills. So there's a lot of layers to that, I would say, not just an Asian female therapist, but like Asian female language, culture, and all of that too. So yes, I always feel like I need to prove myself. However, once I graduated and got licensed and all that and trying to set up my own practice, I do feel like there's a little bit more respect for me for being a female Asian therapist because there's so little of us that we are in such big demand and that they could honor and could value what I have to offer as well. So that's the discrepancy that I'm saying is that in school, I feel like I needed to prove myself a lot. But in my career, I feel like people do value the diversity that I can offer. So that's interesting.
Well, I'm glad you were able to set up your practice and that people are finding value in what you offer. And I think that, this whole stigma of women or immigrants not having as much value as other people is just so ridiculous and silly. So thank you for doing the work that you did to be able to give back to your community and your culture and to be able to help people who look like you to break the cycles that, are still there and that people are struggling with.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity too, because I see it's so important because I do see a lot of my peers also going through, similar things, but not having that person as a guidance, right? So I think like a role model, like we need somebody that look like us to be able to relate to. I have my own role model that I look up to as well. And I want to give that to my own community, the younger people or even people. So important.
I agree. Well, last question, right? If you could use your platform to encourage anyone who may be struggling with their big feelings or emotions, and they're on the fence about talking to a therapist or a coach or someone, what would you say to them?
Yeah. You have nothing to lose by seeking help. I don't think. I mean, the value is there. Now, you do have to shop around for the therapist or for a coach that will fit you best, right? I think there's so much into shopping for a therapist that's important that a lot of people don't get is that you want someone who you can click with. And most importantly, you want to work with somebody who you feel safe with. So please shop around. Every new patient I get, I said, please shop around. We might have a good rapport, but you might find someone with a better fit or might value the same things as you or similar things as you. So definitely shop around. Don't settle for the only one that you see, that you saw for one time. And third of all is, you have nothing to do. I think there's so much value in just, if the therapist sucked and they didn't give you any tools at all, at least the session was spent on hopefully venting, right? Or like just pouring out your heart and soul in a very safe place. That in itself has its value in itself. If the therapist sucks. But if the therapist is really great and you can click with, you can feel safe with, that brings so much more value to that because that's when you can see and feel changes happening in your life. That's when you are motivated to grow also. So yes, finding the best fit is important. But again, going to therapy, even with no goal in mind, will also still be beneficial for you if you use it right.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for this. We were playing tag a little bit because our schedules were conflicting, but we finally did it.
Yes, we did it. I love it.
And I was a little bit nervous too. I mean, you had mentioned that you were a little bit nervous, but there was a lot of sensitive subjects and topics, and I wanted to make sure I asked them properly. And but I think we did a good job.
Yeah, no, you did a really good job. Thank you for giving me that space too, because I do feel safe in this podcast with you. to be able to talk, to talk about my truth. And I think that's very important. And what you do is very important. So thank you for making this relatable to everybody, including myself.
I appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
If people want to find you online or on social media, where can they look you up?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I'm mostly on Instagram. My username is Cindy M Chia, so it's just my name, CINDY for Mary, CHIA. Chia. And I post a lot of my own healing journey there, but I also post a lot of just general coping strategies and mood management things as well on there. I am coming up with a course, a CBT course to help with various struggles that people might have. So stay tuned for that. I will be announcing that on my Instagram. So in the coming.
Cool. All right. Well, Cindy, again, thank you so much for this. Thank you for your
Yeah,
time,
thank
for who
you.
you are, for what you do, and for the work that you've done to be able to give back to your community.
Thank you.
So I'm really grateful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love doing